vagina, and some can back its way up your fallopian tube during the same cycle. But the bottom line is this: the more cycles you have, the more opportunities you have to develop endometriosis. Put another way, the fewer pregnancies you have, the more opportunity you have to develop endometriosis. Anything that interrupts your cycles decreases your chances of having endometriosis. So pregnancy, where your cycles are interrupted for about 10 months, decreases your risk of endometriosis. And breastfeeding, during which most women have no periods, decreases your risk of endometriosis. And using birth control in a continuous regimen in which you never have a period decreases your risk of endometriosis. And even birth control pills where you do have a cycle can decrease your risk because they make the lining in your uterus so thin that you hardly have a period. It's just a teeny drop or two, and there's just nothing there to shed. Well, if there's nothing there to shed, there's not much there to back up your fallopian tubes either. The bottom line is that the more periods you have, the greater your risk for endometriosis. Years ago, the medical profession used to call endometriosis the career woman's disease. And that was because career women were the ones who had period after period after period with no interruptions because they weren't getting pregnant. They were basically building their careers. But now we know that it can happen to any woman, and you don't have to be a career woman. And even women who have had some pregnancies can have endometriosis. So now you know that endometriosis is directly related to having cycles, and it directly results from having cycles. And so the next thing you need to know is the symptoms of endometriosis. Now, the symptoms of endometriosis are a bit tricky. Endometriosis can produce symptoms. It can cause heavy periods, painful periods, pelvic pain, pain with intercourse, pain with orgasm, pain with bowel movements, pain with urination, and infertility. But the quirky thing about endometriosis is that it doesn't always cause symptoms. And the other quirky thing is that the symptoms do not necessarily correlate with the severity of disease. So you could have just one little spot of endometriosis and have all sorts of symptoms. Or you could have a pelvis full of endometriosis and have no symptoms at all. And you could have any combination of symptoms and degree of disease. And the difficult thing about endometriosis is that it's hard to diagnose for some women. Now, the typical story is pretty obvious. It's a woman who's had a lot of periods and not a lot of kids, and she has problematic periods, painful periods, pain with intercourse, pain after, intercourse, pain with bowel movements. She has all kinds of pain. Some women have a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms. Some women have a lot of urinary symptoms. But they usually have a long history of having discomfort or some kind of dysfunction and going to doctor after doctor after doctor, addressing their gastrointestinal tract, addressing their urinary tract, and they can't seem to find out what the problem is. Ultrasounds are normal, x-rays are normal, endoscopies are normal, colonoscopies are normal, all kinds of things are normal, but they still have all these problems and they don't know what's wrong with them. Well, endometriosis is difficult to diagnose. And think about it. It is nothing but little drops of blood on the wrong surfaces inside your pelvis, which then start scarring together. So it's all soft tissue stuff. It's going to be difficult to see on any exam. The only way to truly, definitively diagnose it is to see it with your eyeball. So the way a gynecologist diagnoses endometriosis is they do what we call a laparoscopy. A laparoscopy is a little surgical procedure where we put a telescope into your belly button and we look around with our eyeball to see if we can find those little drops of blood on any of the surfaces where they don't belong, or if we can find scar tissue, adhesions, anywhere where it doesn't belong. So for most women, the accurate, definitive diagnosis depends on a little surgical procedure. And if they find that kind of thing at surgery, they can either laser it, burn it away. Sometimes we can treat it with other means. Sometimes it means opening you up and taking care of things and cleaning things up, taking out abnormal collections of blood in your ovary. All kinds of things can happen once surgery comes into the picture. The goal is to clean it up, but understand, if you go back to having your periods, what's going to happen? Well, guess what? New endometriosis will develop as long as periods are happening. So understand that it's a big deal disease in terms of quality of life, and understand that it's difficult to diagnose, but it is treatable and it can be eradicated. Depending on the person and the situation, there are many different things that can happen to get rid of it. So to summarize what you've learned about endometriosis, it is endometrial tissue that is implanted outside your inner uterine lining. It causes adhesions because it builds up and bleeds no matter where it implants. It's directly related to having menstrual cycles. And it can produce symptoms, but they do not necessarily correlate with the severity of disease. And diagnosis usually involves a laparoscopy where the surgeon can see it with their eyeballs and treat it. And the only way to definitively treat it is to take out the uterus, which is the source of the problem. And then remember, the sustenance, the food for endometriosis is those cycles, those hormones. So even without your uterus, if your hormones are still cycling, any endometriosis that is there can remain. But no new endometriosis can form unless your uterus is there to create it. That's a lot to learn, isn't it? This gives you a pretty thorough understanding of endometriosis. And since this is a series on menopause, the next podcast is going to address the effect of menopause on endometriosis. So I hope this helped you understand endometriosis. You can always have me do a one-on-one consultation with you. All you have to do is go to menopausetailor.me to schedule one. It's very easy. I can help you with this or anything else that you want. I do them all the time. I do them with women all over the world, and they really love the way I take the time to explain things. And with a consultation, I do them on video conferencing, and I have props, I have models, I can show you things. I would show you models of all the stuff I'm talking about and make it really easy for you to understand things. So I invite you to visit my website, which is menopausetailor.me. Go there and, take a little tour around, see all the things I have available for you, and be sure you come back and listen to the next podcast, because it's going to continue this little education on endometriosis as it pertains to your menopause. So I will sign off for today, and I hope you come back next time. See you later. It's Menopause Tailor telling you goodbye. Bye now.